Along the distant, arid horizon, a wind howls a deafening dirge. Tumbleweeds catapult eastward. Yes, I'm aware that's historically inaccurate, blow me. And vultures reel overhead. The midday sun beats brutally down upon the desolate wastes, and all appears still, and all appears forsaken. For all it seems abandoned, 1,000 unnameable savageries occur across this remote expanse. Murders, robberies, betrayals, and burglaries. And the only justice on offer comes at the end of a percussion pistol. Then, just through the haze, ambles a lone figure. He may be hero, he may be villain, a gambler, hustler, bounty hunter, but that he braves the western wilderness at all says 70 different things about him and marks him already as consequential. The Old West embodies the ultimate form of freedom in all its liberty and terror, an antithesis to the authoritarian suburban sandwich to which we subject ourselves today, and the morality tales that inhabit it represent one of the most enduring, original pop culture phenomenons dating back to the very beginnings of the concept of pop lit itself. Welcome, Razor Force, to the Western.
Whose grave are you digging there? Yours.
From the earliest fictionalized accounts of legendary lawman and military scout Wild Bill Hickok and his young protege and friend Buffalo Bill, the Western almost single-handedly pioneered the pulp, set off the age of early cinema, thrived at the advent of the talkies. Indeed, if the 20th century were to be marked by the success of just one fictional genre, Westerns would have to take the top spot. Most amazing of all, unlike other American imports such as baseball or what we call fucking football, over in the old country, they also happen to fucking love it. Perhaps it was all the open space, the lack of autocratic government in a continent soon to be swallowed by socialism. Whatever it was, Westerns went down every bit as well in Europe and in Asia as they ever did in America. When French comic art legend Moebius created his seminal Blueberry comic, he was paying heartfelt tribute to Westerns that were searing across cinema screens across his home country. Hell, he even became a real-life cowboy for a time. The Kurosawa samurai film was itself a Western wearing a fucking kimono. The 50s and 60s proved to be the golden age of the old school Western. John Wayne's filmography of this period represents among the most profitable and popular films ever produced by Hollywood.
Und mehr. Go. Go, Martin, please.
Stand aside, Martin.
No, you don't, Ethan. Ethan, no, you don't!
Stand aside.
Rio Bravo, The Searchers, and The Alamo are all counted among the most enduring examples of the film Western. Audie Murphy's ascent paralleled the Dukes, and even film noir icon Alan Ladd laid it in with the immortal classic known as Shane. On the newly emerging boob tube, the Western was even more massive and became truly established. Successful radio drama Gunsmoke took TV by storm, lasting 20 years and a jaw-dropping 233 ass-fucking episodes. Wagon Train, The Big Valley, The Virginian, The Rifleman, but perhaps my favorite of all time is the surprisingly modern Have Gun, Will Travel, the program a young Gene Roddenberry cut his teeth on, wherein the standard cinematic cowboy was given an all-black makeover, Lash LaRue and Hopalong Cassidy style, to become something more akin to an Old West Batman.
You better step into the sheriff's office next door and check that gun, mister.
Oh, nobody allowed to carry arms in Three Winds?
Nor in Philadelphia, either.
Sounds like a reasonable law for Philadelphia. You say nobody can carry guns in this town, so the only people who have guns are the outlaw scum who will continue to come through here. You can't protect the people of this town, but you take away the only means they have of defending themselves. You say the ranch hands can't come into town on payday and get drunk? Well, what can they do?
But in the 70s, something happened. No, this won't be me belly aching about the Vietnam War era or goddamn hippies, but as an outflow of the cultural transition all across the West, the Western came crashing suddenly down. The silver screen stars of the 40s and 50s stayed strong into the early 60s, but by the next decade, they were aging out and their genre was burning out. Spaghetti Westerns had made their formulaic fare seem tame by comparison, catapulting a new era of Western star. In place of a sheriff, the protagonist was almost as often a bounty hunter, gambler, or even a fucking revolutionary. In the genre-defining Yojimbo remake Fistful of Dollars, Eastwood's man with no name baits his enemies into attacking him just so he can gun them down.
Get 3 coffins ready.
Huh?
I don't think it's nice, you laughing. You see, my mule don't like people laughing. It's the crazy idea you're laughing at him.
A trilogy of Dollars films would kick off an entire Italian Western explosion. Darker, grittier, bloodier, simultaneously cartoony, and yet in some ways more historically accurate, save the fact that Italy's distance from the States meant Native Americans almost never appeared. By the time the other Sergio, Corbucci, got a hold of it, spaghetti westerns were their own animal entirely, sparking an entire field of one-character western films, all starting with blood and guts classic Django.
Well, men, did you hear what our friend said? What do you say we prepare him for his burial?
You know, I think Jamie Foxx might have had some work done. A flurry of fucking imitators would inevitably result with varying effects. Some, like Lee Van Cleef's Wily Sabata or Johnny Garco's near supernatural Sartana, would spawn several sequels and, of course, unofficial spin-offs.
You look just like a scarecrow.
I am your pallbearer.
Don't shoot, it's me. Hold it, Elmo. We'll be killing each other.
What a wonderful idea. Give Sam my regards.
And it's the unofficial spin-offs and resultant lack of quality control that would ultimately tank the spaghetti western's fortunes. It's estimated that between 1964 and 1968, over 600 six-shooter symphonies were produced in Italy alone. A total that makes modern superheroes look positively obscure and unsuccessful by fucking comparison. And with that much product, the standard life cycle of any genre was cut Shapiro fucking short. In fact, within 4 years, filmmakers in Italy were already experimenting heavily with deconstructing a formula that was all of 4 fucking years old. Sergio Corbucci's masterpiece, The Great Silence, would make even more waves for its atypical snowy setting, dark and downbeat ending, and in a nod to the ridiculousness of the taciturn American film cowboy, mute protagonist named Silence, who wields not a revolver but a Mauser C96, my fucking favorite, bending the genre near to its breaking point in the process.
Non mi ammazzare, silenzio. Non darò più la caccia a un bandito in vita mia, nemmeno se avesse sulla testa una taglia da $1 milione. Te lo giuro. Maledetto! Le mie mani! Mi hai massacrato le mani!
With the success of For a Few Dollars More, spaghetti westerns would be an even bigger smash stateside, and soon Franco Nero, Johnny Garco, Charles Bronson, Klaus Kinski, and yes, Clint fucking Eastwood would supplant the Audie Murphys, Robert Mitchums, and John Waynes in westerns of the late 60s. Indeed, John Wayne wouldn't survive the fucking 70s. Even yellow cowboy paperbacks from the period make clear the genre was undergoing radical reinvention as the heroic frontier tales of the pulp era were were power injected with blood and fucking testosterone. Eastwood's Outlaw of Josie Wales functions almost as a prequel of his later epic Unforgiven, and the star, as many times argued, probably would have been received on the same level of Unforgiven if only it hadn't been released in the saturnine 70s.
You're wanted, Wales.
I reckon I'm right popular. You a bounty hunter?
Yeah, he's got to do something for a living these days.
Dying ain't much of a living, boy.
For sadly, all this success was unsustainable. By the 80s, it was all over. And with the benefit of hindsight, I, for one, would argue that when the Western went, a part of ourselves went with it. When the Western again appeared, it simply wasn't the same. Pale Rider, one of the few 80s examples of the genre, was made almost entirely off Clint's bankable box office name. For my money, it is peak Elemental Eastwood, a movie that pushed forward the fire and brimstone symbology of his directorial touchstone High Plains Drifter and leaned up the Western storytelling to such an extent that he wound up telling a ghost story masquerading as a Western.
What does this preacher look like?
Lean. His eyes. Yeah, his eyes. Something strange about him. That mean something to you?
Sounds like a man I once knew.
Might be. He recognized your name.
Couldn't be. The man I'm thinking about is dead.
It really can't be stressed enough, but Pale Rider was literally only released because the stars simply would not take no for an answer. Indeed, Eastwood himself proposed the movie entirely because, quote, "We haven't made a Western in a while." Its reception typified how pop culture regarded the Western in the 80s. The Washington Post famously bloviated that the movie helped us to, quote, "recollect why the Western lost its appeal. The movie is really pretty, full of little gold aspens and snow-capped mountains, but it is slow, dark, and badly timed." A bit like when you published Amber Heard's anti-Johnny Depp hit piece, eh, Post? Better lube it up for the reprisal, bitch. When Eastwood entered the film at Cannes Film Festival, the first such attempt of his career, cinema snobs the world over pissed down their leg.
The first Western in 9 years from the biggest movie star in the world, Clint Eastwood. We're going to be very interested in how it does at the box office because it'll help them decide if there's still a market for the Hollywood Western.
Roger, I was disappointed. I thought it was very predictable. You talked about the story being predictable, and a lot of Western stories, it's true, are predictable. I just had a very flat reaction to the picture. It never got me going.
Very interesting and very intelligent, almost the way it would be handled in a samurai movie, a good one from Japan, where this level of existence and other levels of existence are kind of there, and yet nobody quite says so. Like the marshal doesn't say, "You're the guy I killed 6 years ago."
Yes, but we have clues that we have clues, right. Very visual.
I found that intriguing. I also found the visual look of the movie very, very interesting, so I did like it. And,
well, nothing special for me, and I think that the jury's still out on whether the Western is going to come back.
Now, the genre regained some momentum in the 90s with Tombstone and Oscar-winning Unforgiven, but it proved a false start, and the latter would serve as something of a headstone for the genre from that point forward. Perhaps nothing typifies the cinematic status of the Western than the simple fact that Clint Eastwood, for 50-plus years, the foremost face of the genre, has not made a Western film, even as a director, since the year 1992, which made the sudden resurgence of the Western in the early part of the millennium all the more mind-blowing. Kevin Costner's career-encapsulating epic Open Range was only the opening act of what the HBO icon Deadwood would do less than 1 year later. But this was not your granddaddy's Western. Indeed, it wasn't your dad's fucking Western either, you limber dick cocksucker.
Look at him, striding out like some randy maniac bishop. Sheriff, about his duties to the camp, huh?
Luck trouble didn't jump out earlier, huh, Bullock? Might have found you mid-thrust at other business. What is it? Taken by a vision? You would not want to be staring like that at me.
Here, one of the immortal tales of the Old West, that of infamous boomtown and murder capital Deadwood, reinvented itself and the entire genre by reminding the audience that the frontier era was also the Victorian era. And so NYPD Blue genius David Milch crafted masterful dialogue that delicately walked the line betwixt ornate and officious and brutally, bluntly profane.
That's twice you fucking stared at me.
I feel you breathing on my neck.
Should I exhale out my ass?
And I believe you're doing it intentionally.
Why? You think I believe you're a fucking cunt?
If we fight, it won't be a casual matter.
Oh, I see you got your big fucking knife there. And hid somewhere on your persons, you probably got some pussified shooting instrument. But I am good at first impressions, and you are a fucking cunt. And I doubt you fought many men. Maybe even one.
Deadwood opened the fucking floodgates. Watching the show win awards and court praise from every quarter, Hollywood suddenly greenlit a handful of cinematic westerns. 2007's 3:10 to Yuma was a reinvented classic for the modern age that paid earnest tribute to the original. Appaloosa and The Proposition explored differing perspectives of the West. One, a revenge romance tale. The other, a recounting of the oft-ignored Australian frontier, directed ably by musician Nick Cave. Now, it was around this time that video games also began to get in on the act. 2004's Red Dead Revolver, 2005's Gun, and 2006's Call of Juarez pitched the ball, and 2010's Red Dead Redemption crushed it like Barry Bonds after 100 cc's of flaxseed oil. And then, inexplicably, it all sort of stopped. The games were still selling. Deadwood, though unceremoniously canceled in 2007, still remained the finest thing HBO ever produced. Blow me, Sopranos and Wire fanboys, it's a simple fucking fact. And Red Dead was now Rockstar's second bestseller after GTA and Closing Fucking Fast. But films failed to fucking appear. Outside of low-budget bullshit or sleeper standouts like 2015's Bone Tomahawk, which for my money is basically 3/4 of a good Kurt Russell film, it seemed like the only guy who was allowed to make big-budget westerns anymore was Quentin Tarantino, which when you really break them down are really just Kroger brand spaghetti westerns. Linguini westerns, if you fucking will. Plenty of Leo DiCaprio memes, but precious little pistol fan and fucking machismo. Spotlighting the Western famine even further, 2018's Red Dead Redemption 2 became one of the best-selling games of all time, with 45 fucking million copies sold as of this video's recording. And yet, there's so much spandex in the cinema, there seemingly ain't any room for skin and smoke wagons. Sure, there's the oddball effort here and there. 2014's Dark Valley was a stunning, if somewhat slow-paced, Austrian Western, and in the same year, Mads Mikkelsen and Eva Green starred in The Salvation, which I similarly recommend, but outside of that, you have better luck finding a pulse on a Clinton witness. And really, that's a crying-ass shame. Much like film noir, whose living death I lament on the regular, the Western is a tentpole genre that encapsulates and characterizes the culture of the United fucking States. And studying the Old West, effectively the closest we've come to a country devoid of a federal government, is a civics lesson and a half as well. But while I dig the post-Deadwood revisionist Western genre and the Red Dead-esque offshoots it inspired, am I the only one a hankering for a proper pistol-twirling old-school style Western whose morality ain't more gray than Biden's hair plugs? We'd beat the everyone's a bad guy and we're all different shades of shit horse until it could almost pass for Ann Coulter. It was neat for a beat, folks. But how's about we move on? I'm not saying we need a modern Hopalong Cassidy to flash a cheesy grin and save the maiden from the fucking railroad tracks, but here's a fucking thought. An old school elemental Western, maybe, where the nameless agent of vengeance rolls into a wicked town and dispenses God's wrath while quoting scripture. Something in the mold of High Plains Drifter, Pale Rider, and the final act of fucking Tombstone. When did we get so bogged down in Bolshevism and bullshit But I repeat myself that absolutely everything has to be revisionism or deconstruction. Classic comic writer Chuck Dixon, whose videos you can see along with mine over on Unauthorized TV, shameless plug, produced a masterful few video essays on the importance of not just the Western, but the old school morality tale Western as a reinforcing influence for young and old alike. I recommend you check it out. It's just oh so fucking worth it. But folks, we've done the amoral muddle fuck. We've consigned the Western to the filmic funeral pyre for 4 decades now, and it's yet to even break a sweat. Maybe, just maybe, as superhero stories inevitably sally off to the glue factory, we saddle up, shoulder our 6-shooter, and revive the genre that effectively invented pop culture. It launches my nads into orbit when I read one of the myriad Hollywood Reporter stink pieces about aging action stars, yet not one of these wank shafts has filmed a fucking cowboy movie in their entire career. Westerns are one of the fair few genres that old men with broken dicks can still do remotely fucking convincingly. All you gotta be able to do is look menacing, hold a gun, and maybe climb on a horse once an epoch. And honestly, the last bit is outright optional. Wagons exist, asshole. Hop on and open fire. The more leathery the face, the fucking better. Westerns may be the only film genre where Arnold could walk his bow-legged Austrian ass on set, his tits sagging and skin looking like a Sharpay's nutsack that was washed on hot, and the director would say, "Fuck the makeup artist, you're perfect just the way you are. Barry, get me the Crypt Keeper lighting rig. This is a goddamn gold mine just waiting to be drilled like an ugly nanny at Schwarzenegger's house." Better still, the Western, like the pulp heroes I've already talked about, is perfectly in line with the zeitgeist. Every explosion of Western popularity, to my mind, has accompanied a populace who feel uniquely hemmed in by present circumstances. The urban and suburban living and the undercurrent of communist subversion marked the initial popularity of 50s and 60s Westerns, while the more prosperous and carefree 1980s were a virtual graveyard for goddamn Westerns. But when the economic anxieties, foreign wars, and social strife of the late 80s and early 90s set in, wouldn't you know it, Unforgiven, Tombstone, and Wyatt fucking Earp are all back in action. Likewise, with our post-9/11 apprehensions and the launch of HBO's Deadwood, the 310 to Yuma remake was a massive success in the same year shitloads of Americans were being booted out of their fucking houses in the 2006 housing crash. Every time the American people feel hemmed in, we escape through a world-class Western. And now, we've been literally locked indoors the last 2 titty fucking years, representing some of the most fertile soil for a Western we've had in a minute, and all we got to choose from is Yellowstone and its shitty spinoff, both of which are sky-splitting smash hits. Gorsh, but I wonder why. Money is on the table here, so aspiring creators, folks, this is your time to grab that goddamn bag. We hear every few years about the possibility of a Western revival, and in the right non-Hollywood hands, I could certainly see it. Hell, Gina Carano's new Western looks pretty fucking good, but on that subject, I defer to Eli Wallach in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
When you have to shoot, shoot, don't talk.
I'm Razor Fist, giddy up in God fucking speed.
So you found out you're not a businessman after all.
Just a man.
An ancient race.